Hey everyone, welcome to r/Tales from the Jobsite, where I bring you stories from around the web and listener submissions that show some of the wacky sides of construction, remodeling, and more. I'm Uncle Reddit, and have I got a story for you. Let's kick this video off with a little funny. The 3 construction workers. Once there were 3 construction workers. When it was lunchtime one day, they all sat down together. The first one opened his lunchbox and said, "Ew, turkey, I hate turkey." So he shot himself with a rivet gun. The second one opened his lunchbox and said, "Ugh, ham, I hate ham." So he jumped off the building. The third one opened his lunchbox and said, "Ew, mac and cheese, I hate mac and cheese." So he ran himself over with a bulldozer. At the funeral, their 3 wives were talking about their lost husbands. The first 2 were very sad, but the third was rather puzzled. The first wife said, "I thought he liked turkey." The second one said, "I thought he liked ham." But the third one was still puzzled. She said, "I thought he packed his own lunch." What's your hurry? So I'm driving south on Highway 93 in Montana, about 15 miles north of Idaho, and come up on a construction zone. They have one of those lights with a sign that says to follow the pilot car. We figure it's a pretty long construction zone as it takes 20 minutes for the pilot car to show up. Yup, 15 miles of repaving and they just put down the chip seal. I'm in my dually with my 34-foot triple-axle toy hauler that I just detailed the day before. The gravel on the chip seal is flying everywhere and sticking to my truck and trailer, so I slow down to less than 10 miles per hour. I was the second car in the line with about 30 cars behind me. The pilot car leaves me as they are pulling a pace of 30 miles per hour. Another pilot car shows up and stops me. This angry, ugly bee gets out and starts yelling at me for running the red light. I tell her that the pilot car drove away since I was driving less than 10 miles per hour, and point out that if I ran the red light, then so did all the other vehicles behind me. She yells to follow her and keep up, and I reply, "I'm not driving over 10 miles per hour," and she says I'm already in trouble for running the red light. She gets in her car and goes 30 miles per hour, and I go less than 10. She stops, and she's really peeved off. She screams at me to pull into a turnout that is about 10 feet long, so I just stay put. She screams at me several times and is on her radio screaming about some a-hole from California who ran the red light and won't keep up and is refusing to pull off to the side of the road. She then signals for the other 30 cars to pass me and tells me I have to stay until another pilot car comes to get me. After the last car passes, I start going. The only other pilot cars I see are leading groups of other cars, and the drivers all wave to me as if they're getting a kick out of me ticking off the other driver. I get passed by another group, but a couple RVs pull in behind me and stick with me. It took us an hour and a half. I was expecting for something to happen at the end, but there was just another pilot car who waved and smiled. Yeah, I've had a few run-ins over the years with pilot cars. I'm not sure what the problem is, but it seems there's a certain mentality that, I know they're told by their bosses that they have to travel a certain speed, kind of keep the pace going, and I get it, but not every vehicle, especially larger ones, are going to be able to do that. And I know darn well I'm not going to respond well if somebody jumps out of their truck and starts screaming at me about stuff like that if I'm trying to be careful and safe with my vehicle and not get it all banged up. What's that smell? First off, I work for a plumbing company that recently started a remodel for a local hospital. The day started off like any other. I woke up at 5 and was at the shop by 6 to load the trucks with the material for the day. On the way to the job site, I decided I should stop and grab a burrito from the nearest gas station, which was my first mistake. As the day went on, I started to feel like a bomb went off in my stomach, but I decided to ignore it and press on. Around 8 o'clock, all the companies gathered for our safety meeting. Now, this is the first week of this job, so we're still doing demo work. As the superintendent went through his safety checklist, I snuck off to the side to let out what I thought would be a harmless fart. This harmless fart turned out to be what I'm sure Satan's butt smells like. So around the halfway point of the meeting, the superintendent made a sour face, and I mean sour. The guy stopped his checklist immediately and asked us if we had begun any demo work this morning, to which my crew and I replied no. This caused concern, which led to a witch hunt for a broken sewer main. Obviously, I knew what the smell was, but was too embarrassed to speak up. Next thing I know, we had to clear the site until the source, me, was found. They never found a leak, and I never said a word. So the moral of the story is to never, and I mean never, trust a gas station breakfast burrito. Back in my younger days, I could eat anything, and I mean anything, before getting to work at the job site, and my stomach could handle it fine, just the smells coming out of me weren't always very pleasant. I tended to work alone a lot. In fact, we were building a nightclub in Philadelphia, right along Delaware Avenue, and there was a little shack right down the street called Johnny's Hot Sausages. Actually, I think it was Johnny's Hot Polish Sausages, something like that. And little tiny greasy spoon, and that's what they specialized in. They cooked hot Polish sausage all day long. Put it on a bun, you got your fixings on the side, whatever drink you wanted. Well, that was our breakfast and lunch every day that we worked there. And yeah, some days things got a little ripe on that job site. Measure twice. I was having some flooring installed in my kitchen as part of a renovation project a few years ago. The contractor had estimated how much flooring we would need and did all the purchasing. Toward the end of the renovation project, I get a call from my contractor letting me know that the flooring they had purchased, and that they had already installed 95% of, wasn't enough to finish the job. I thought, no big deal, just go buy more. Evidently, the flooring was out of stock. And to make matters worse, this particular type was no longer in production. Ugh. Come to find out that my contractor had bought the flooring from a wholesaler who had bought some leftovers from one of the big name stores. I spent hours and hours calling every store and wholesaler I could find all over the state, but didn't have any luck. After some very diligent Googling, I came to find out that the big name store was selling that same flooring under a different brand name in Canada. So how was I going to get that flooring to South Florida from Canada? The store wouldn't ship it or deliver it to me, so I called a mailbox and shipping store near their location and was able to arrange for them to receive the delivery and then mail it to me. It ended up being quite expensive flooring, $130 worth of flooring and $420 in shipping and delivery. Oof. On top of that, my contractor had a previously scheduled vacation, which he took during all of this, and then proceeded to extend the trip another week instead of finishing the renovation. Needless to say, that contractor and I went our separate ways, and with a new contractor, who has been with me ever since, the project ended up a huge success. Yeah, I've run into that issue a few times myself in the past for my own projects at home. Usually, I always had the mindset on a job site to overorder so that A, we would have some spare materials like, flooring and ceiling tiles, things like that they'll probably need in the future. And it's nice to have some spares. If, you get some water stains on some ceiling tiles, you got some new tiles to put in place in case they stop making that pattern or whatever. It's just easier to have them on hand. Flooring tiles the same way. Commercial vinyl tile, you always try to have a few on hand, for when they move walls or, something gets torn up. But at home, sometimes I'll cut it close because it's coming out of my pocket. And yeah, I've been caught a couple of times not being able to find the exact stuff. So yeah, I try to buy extra now. That way I've got it, and then I can return what I don't want or need. Uninvited guests. Moving into a new space may unfortunately bring some unwanted guests. For us, our dream home turned out to not really belong to us. We moved into our apartment in the middle of quarantine. After a lengthy process of trying to find a place that felt right and jumping through hoops with the virus, we found this quaint little place in the heart of Lincoln Park. We loved it, but after we finally put our boxes away, I started to notice weird sounds. I was working from home at the time, and honestly, I thought I was going crazy with the isolation, but the sound kept up. Finally, I made my fiancé sit in complete silence with me on a Saturday until he heard it. Flash forward 2 weeks, and we finally got an appointment for an exterminator to take a look. He discovered an entire mouse colony, and when I say colony, I mean multiple families and at least 50 mice, living in the pipes behind the bathroom and in the walls. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to freak at a mouse, but seeing how many there were and watching them all scatter when the exterminator moved some tile flooring was actually terrifying. We're actually going through the process now of selling the apartment. Not exactly because of the mice, but that didn't help. Yeah, a few mice wouldn't bother me, but 50? That's a little disturbing. Things got a little backed up. We own a small plumbing company and get all kinds of calls that make us scratch our heads in disbelief. A newly married couple called us with an SOS request for help because they poured cement down the toilet during a home renovation. The ability to work on a DIY renovation sometimes comes with a nightmare. People usually don't realize that since cement, or concrete, is initially liquid, that they won't harm their drain pipes. To minimize the discomfort of disposing of the excess cement, the new homeowners poured a small amount of renovation materials down the toilet. Not expecting that the material will harden with water and the other flowing stuff, they come to a dreadful situation of a blocked sewer line. Our team was able to navigate the blockage with some high-end router and burnt through a few bits. My advice to anyone doing a DIY renovation? Just call an expert. I'm not sure I would totally agree with that, but I do think that if you're going to do renovations and stuff, a little common sense goes a long way. So does a little research ahead of time. Pouring anything like paint, drywall spackle, concrete, caulking. Heck, we manufacture soap, and even pouring the remnants of that out of the containers down the drain could be really bad later on. Cover up. When it comes to home renovations, it's best to not cut corners. For one of our newer clients, it didn't take long to discover the ceiling paint job in the primary bedroom was far from quality. This ceiling, painted in unfortunate dark navy, that the family hadn't requested but accepted to get the 6-week-long renovation process finally finished, started looking bubbly and wet a few weeks after the renovation. They noticed what looked almost like wet water droplets from the moisture growing on the ceiling. At first they chalked it up to the Texas humidity, but after a few days something started to feel off. The husband finally got a ladder and went up there. The paint could scratch off, and piece by piece he discovered what the painters had really gone over. Light blue paint with spots of black mold. Turns out there was a reason the ceiling was painted that dark navy. After a bit of back and forth, the original contractor stopped taking calls from the client. He would end up having to sue to get the money back for the repairs that needed to be done. In the meantime, they called our company in to take care of the job and document the findings for the courts. We came in and stripped the ceiling, paint, and drywall, dried out the space, repaired the ceiling, and repainted a beige and much brighter color. The whole process took weeks, but it was worth it for this family to finally call their place home. The homeowners finally got restitution after about a year, and the old contractor has since gone out of business. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that may or may not have been black mold. Either way, mold is bad. You don't want any kind of mold in your house because it smells like crap and just makes things horrible. But just pulling off the drywall, letting the space dry out and putting it back on, I'm not sure that was the answer either. If water droplets were building up on that paint job, that tells me a couple things. Either there was an active leak somewhere, or there was a lack of ventilation somewhere that was causing the humidity to build up in that area. So honestly, somebody needs to do a little more digging to find out what's causing this in the first place. If walls could talk. We had some contractors a few years back to renovate half our house. One of the projects involved replacing the drywall in our bedroom. The project looked great, but after a few weeks we started to smell a foul odor in our room and couldn't identify the source. It got so bad that my husband and I had to sleep in the living room for a few days while we tried to figure out what it was. Anyway, upon inspection of the room, I noticed that there was a soft, wet spot on part of the drywall that the contractors put in. We called the contractor to let him know, and he sent some guys out to take a look at it. Well, they ended up having to remove that section of drywall, and what they found was absolutely horrifying. Apparently, one of the guys had left a sandwich on the horizontal drywall stud and then put drywall over it by accident. After a short amount of time, that sandwich turned into a thick puddle of mold and maggots. Luckily, I wasn't there and only my husband saw it. I'm not sure if I would have been able to sleep in my room anymore. They fixed it, paid for the extermination services, and put new drywall up for free, but I'm still slightly haunted by the thought. I've got some questions, man. So, there are no horizontal drywall studs in houses, quite honestly. Most likely it was some sort of blocking, to either stabilize the studs on either side or blocking to, act as a nailer for something else. But how do you accidentally leave a sandwich in a wall, accidentally cover it with drywall? And if it was an exterior wall, it would have been even worse because you have to insulate those. That means several people, or at least this guy, had to spend some kind of time working around that sandwich. That tells me the guy thought it was no big deal and just figured he'd board it up in that wall and it would be the end of it. Hey guys, thanks for hanging out with me today. If you've enjoyed this content, would you do me a favor? Would you consider giving this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and maybe click that little bell icon so you don't miss the fat guy with the beard telling you stories. See ya!